Imagine you own slaves. Your entire economy, your way of life, is built on this institution. Now, a war has erupted to preserve it. Which side do you choose? The obvious answer is the Confederacy, but for 4 crucial states, the answer was the Union. They were slave states that refused to secede. This wasn't a moral crusade, it was a brutal, cold-blooded calculation of geography, fear, and power. Their decision and the secret war fought within their own borders didn't just influence the Civil War, it decided it. And Abraham Lincoln was willing to burn the Constitution to make sure they made the right choice. To understand why, you have to look at a map. These weren't just any states. They were the buffer, the dividing line. They held the industrial power, the manpower, and most importantly, the strategic ground. Losing them wasn't an option. It was a guaranteed Confederate victory. If you're fascinated by the hidden pressures that shape history, make sure you subscribe. We go deep into stories just like this one. April 1861. The cannons firing on Fort Sumter weren't just an attack, they were a question posed to every state. Virginia, Arkansas, Tennessee, North Carolina, they all gave their answer, joining the Confederacy. But Lincoln's eyes were fixed on the states that remained silent. Maryland, which surrounded his capital on 3 sides. Kentucky, which controlled the vital Ohio River. Missouri, the gateway to the west with the Mississippi River. And tiny industrial Delaware. These 4 slave states were now the geopolitical pivot point of the nation. Their combined white population was more than half of that of the entire Confederacy. They had more than double the number of horses and mules, crucial for armies. Lincoln knew a simple, terrifying truth. I think to lose Kentucky is nearly the same as to lose the whole game. He might as well have said it about all 4. The first crisis came just 1 week after Fort Sumter. Lincoln called for 75,000 volunteers, and troops from the North began pouring south to defend Washington. But to get to the capital, they had to pass through Baltimore, Maryland, a city seething with secessionist sympathy. On April 19th, the 6th Massachusetts Militia arrived. As they tried to change trains marching across town, a mob descended. They weren't just yelling insults, they were throwing bricks, paving stones, and firing pistols. The soldiers, trapped and terrified, fired back. When the smoke cleared, 4 soldiers and 12 civilians were dead. It was the first real bloodshed of the Civil War, and it happened not on a battlefield, but on a city street. The message was clear. Maryland was a powder keg, and the fuse was lit. The Baltimore riot was just the beginning. In the aftermath, the city's pro-secessionist mayor and police chief took action. They authorized the destruction of the critical railroad bridges north of the city. Telegraph lines to Washington were cut. For nearly a week, the capital of the United States was completely isolated from the North. It was an island in hostile territory. Lincoln and his government were trapped. Rumors flew of an imminent Confederate attack from Virginia. Regiments that were supposed to be arriving to defend the city simply vanished, unable to get through. This was the Confederacy's best and perhaps only chance to win the war in a single stroke by capturing the entire federal government. Lincoln faced a choice: obey the law and lose the country, or break the law to save it.
He chose to save the country. Lincoln authorized the Army to suspend the writ of habeas corpus along the rail lines. This is a cornerstone of American law, the right of a person under arrest to be brought before a judge to determine if their detention is lawful. By suspending it, Lincoln gave the military the power to arrest and detain anyone suspected of sympathizing with the South without charges, without trial, indefinitely. It was a breathtakingly unconstitutional act. The army swept into Maryland. They arrested the Baltimore police chief, the mayor, numerous state legislators, and dozens of other prominent secessionists. They were thrown into military prisons. Chief Justice Roger Taney, the very same justice from the Dred Scott decision, issued a ruling from a lower court declaring Lincoln's actions illegal. Lincoln simply ignored him. He had secured his capital, but he did it with the tactics of a dictator.
If Maryland required an iron fist, Kentucky demanded a velvet glove. This was Lincoln's home state, and he understood its people's fiercely independent and divided loyalties. His own wife had family fighting for the Confederacy. A heavy-handed approach like the one in Maryland would have instantly pushed Kentucky into secession, opening up the entire Ohio River as a Confederate highway into the heart of the North. So Lincoln played a delicate, dangerous game of patience. When Kentucky's governor declared the state officially neutral in the conflict, Lincoln, despite it being legally absurd, accepted it. He didn't send troops, he didn't make demands, he allowed the state to trade with both North and South. He was waiting for the Confederacy to make a mistake. And in September 1861, they did. Impatient with Kentucky's neutrality and fearing a Union move, Confederate General Leonidas Polk violated it first. He sent troops to occupy the strategic town of Columbus on the Mississippi River. It was the single greatest political blunder of the war's opening year. Lincoln's trap was sprung. The Confederacy was now the aggressor, the invader of a neutral state. The Kentucky legislature, which had been teetering on a knife's edge, immediately erupted in pro-Union outrage. They formally requested aid from the federal government, abandoned neutrality, and declared their loyalty to the Union. Union troops under a then unknown brigadier general named Ulysses S. Grant swiftly moved in to occupy other key river towns. Lincoln had won Kentucky without firing a shot, simply by letting his opponent move first. Securing Kentucky wasn't just about politics, it was about geography. The Ohio River became a secure base of operations and a supply artery for the entire Union war effort in the West. From the banks of the Ohio, Union armies could launch invasions deep into the Confederate heartland. Forts Henry and Donelson, Shiloh, Vicksburg, none of these pivotal campaigns would have been possible without control of the river networks that began in Kentucky. The river allowed the Union to project its industrial might southward, moving men and material on a scale the Confederacy's rickety railroad system could never match. Generals win battles, but geography often wins wars. By holding Kentucky, the Union held the keys to the entire Western theater. If Maryland was a swift crackdown and Kentucky a political chess match, Missouri was a descent into hell. This wasn't a conventional conflict, it was a savage, no-holds-barred civil war in miniature. The state was bitterly divided. St. Louis, with its large German immigrant population, was fiercely pro-Union. The rural areas, known as Little Dixie, were dominated by pro-slavery planters. The conflict here had been simmering for years, an extension of the bloody border clashes with abolitionist Kansas. When the war officially broke out, Missouri didn't just split, it shattered. Neighbor turned against neighbor, family against family. This was the true meaning of brother versus brother, and it would leave scars on the state for a century. The flashpoint was the St. Louis Arsenal, which held the largest cache of weapons west of the Mississippi. The pro-secessionist governor, Claiborne Jackson, wanted those weapons for his state militia. The Union commander in St. Louis, the zealous and aggressive Captain Nathaniel Lyon, was determined to stop him. In May 1861, Jackson's militia set up a training camp, Camp Jackson, on the outskirts of the city. Lyon, convinced it was a Confederate plot, surrounded the camp with his own force, largely composed of German-American volunteers. He forced the surrender of the entire militia without a fight. But as he marched his prisoners through the streets of St. Louis, a hostile crowd gathered and a riot broke out. Lyon's troops opened fire, killing nearly 30 civilians. The Camp Jackson affair destroyed any hope of neutrality or compromise in Missouri. It ignited a firestorm of violence that would consume the state. After Camp Jackson, the official state government fled, setting up a Confederate government in exile. A rival pro-Union government was established in its place. Missouri now had 2 governors and 2 legislatures. While conventional battles like Wilson's Creek and Pea Ridge were fought, the real war in Missouri took place in the shadows. Pro-Confederate bushwhackers and pro-Union jayhawkers waged a brutal guerrilla campaign. These weren't soldiers, they were partisans who lived off the land, targeted civilians, and practiced a form of total war that the main armies wouldn't see until Sherman's march to the sea. Leaders like William Quantrill and Bloody Bill Anderson led Confederate bands that terrorized Unionist sympathizers, culminating in atrocities like the Lawrence Massacre in Kansas. This was a war with no front lines and no rules. The Union response to this guerrilla war was equally brutal. To cut off support for the bushwhackers, Union General Thomas Ewing issued General Order No. 11 in August 1863. This order commanded the forced depopulation of 4 entire counties along the Kansas border. Tens of thousands of Missourians, most of them women, children, and the elderly, were given just 15 days to abandon their homes and farms. The army then swept through, burning what was left to create a desolate no-man's land. It was one of the most draconian acts against a civilian population in American history. It broke the back of the guerrilla movement, but it also cemented a legacy of bitterness and hatred that would fuel feuds and outlaw culture, giving rise to figures like Jesse James and the Younger Brothers, who learned their trade as teenage Confederate guerrillas. And then there was Delaware. The 4th border state is often forgotten because its story lacks the high drama of the others. While technically a slave state, the institution was dying out. Fewer than 1,800 enslaved people lived there in 1860, compared to over 110,000 in Kentucky. Delaware's economy was industrial and firmly tied to the North, particularly Philadelphia. While there were some Southern sympathizers, there was never any serious threat of secession. The state legislature overwhelmingly rejected it. Delaware's contribution to the Union was quiet but steady, providing soldiers and industrial goods. Its story is a reminder that the border state identity wasn't monolithic. It was a spectrum, and Delaware was firmly on the Union end of it. So let's step back and look at the big picture. What if Lincoln had failed? What if Maryland, Kentucky, and Missouri had joined the Confederacy? The consequences are staggering. Washington, D.C. would have been indefensible, surrounded on all sides by enemy territory. The capital would have fallen. The industrial heartland of Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois would have had a hostile border right on its doorstep, the Ohio River. The Union would have lost nearly 3 million people, a huge source of manpower for its armies. It would have lost critical manufacturing, livestock, and control of the Mississippi and Ohio rivers. It is not an exaggeration to say that the Confederacy with the border states is a confederacy that likely wins its independence. Lincoln's ruthless, sometimes illegal, and always politically masterful handling of this crisis was his first and perhaps his most important victory of the war. The war in the border states was also a different kind of war psychologically. In Massachusetts or Alabama, the enemy was a distant other. In Kentucky and Missouri, the enemy was your neighbor, your cousin, your own brother. Families were literally torn apart. Kentucky's own Senator John J. Crittenden had one son who became a general in the Union Army and another who became a general in the Confederate Army. This intimate, personal conflict bred a unique level of bitterness and brutality. The violence was not abstract, it was personal. This internal struggle highlights the true nature of a civil war. It's not just a war between states, but a war within communities and within the hearts of individuals. Despite their internal divisions, the border states provided a massive number of troops for the Union cause. Over 300,000 soldiers from these 4 states fought for the United States. Men from Kentucky helped secure the victories at Shiloh and Perryville. Missouri regiments were crucial in the Vicksburg campaign that split the Confederacy in 2. These men were fighting not only for the nation, but often against their own kin. Their loyalty came at a high personal cost, but their contribution was indispensable. They were the living embodiment of the Union's claim that the nation was indivisible, proving that even in states where slavery was legal, allegiance to the old flag could still run deeper than allegiance to a new one. The delicate situation in the border states also explains one of the most misunderstood aspects of the war: Lincoln's approach to emancipation. His primary goal, first and always, was to preserve the Union. He knew that any premature move against slavery would instantly drive the border states into the arms of the Confederacy. This is why the Emancipation Proclamation of 1863 was such a carefully crafted legal document. It freed slaves only in the states currently in rebellion, specifically exempting the border states and parts of the South already under Union control. To modernize, it seems hypocritical, but to Lincoln, it was a strategic necessity. He had to win the war first, and to do that, he needed the border states. The fight to end slavery could only be won after the fight to save the nation was secured. The end of the war in 1865 did not end the conflict in the border states. In many ways, it just changed its form. The deep-seated hatreds from the guerrilla war in Missouri fueled decades of violence and political strife. Former Confederate bushwhackers like Jesse James became folk heroes to some, continuing their war against Unionist banks and railroads. In Kentucky, the post-war period saw a surge in pro-Confederate sentiment, a strange nostalgia for a cause they never officially joined. These states didn't fit neatly into the national narrative of North versus South. They were a third entity, with a complex, often contradictory legacy of having been on both sides and neither all at once. Their path through Reconstruction and beyond was uniquely their own, shaped by the war they fought against themselves. The American Civil War is often painted in broad strokes of blue and gray. But the real story, the one that decided the outcome before the great battles were even fought, was painted in shades of gray. It was won and lost in the state houses of Kentucky, on the bloody streets of Baltimore, and in the scorched fields of Missouri. It was a conflict defined not by grand armies meeting in open battle, but by brutal choices, political gambles, and a president willing to bend the rules of democracy to save it. These states, the brothers who fought themselves, were the hinge of fate upon which the future of the United States turned. They were the secret weapon, the critical battleground, and the forgotten key to the Union's ultimate survival. The divisions in these states were incredibly deep. Do you think you would have sided with the Union or the Confederacy if you lived in 1861 Kentucky or Missouri? It's a tough question. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And thanks for watching.